My name is Rachel Holloway, and on September 4th, 2021, my entire world changed in an instant. I had always considered myself an ordinary person, living a normal life, caught up in the everyday routine. I worked as a graphic designer, constantly glued to my phone, checking emails, scrolling through social media, and staying up to date with the latest trends. It was just another Tuesday morning in Denver, Colorado, and like always, I was multitasking, walking down a busy street while my eyes were fixed on my phone. I was so absorbed in a trending video that I didn't notice the delivery truck speeding toward me. I never saw it coming. One moment, I was there, scrolling through my screen, and the next, everything went dark. The impact was devastating. They told me later that my body was thrown nearly 25 feet across the intersection. But I didn't feel pain, not at first. Instead, I found myself floating above the chaos, watching as a crowd gathered around me. I could see the paramedics working frantically, hear the distant sound of sirens, and even recognize my shattered phone lying just a few feet away from my body, its screen still glowing. But none of it felt real. It was as if I had been pulled out of time itself, watching the world from a distance, yet feeling completely at peace. Then, everything around me began to fade, and I was pulled into something far greater than anything I had ever known. A tunnel of light appeared before me, unlike anything I could describe. It wasn't just bright, it was alive, filled with a presence so powerful and overwhelming that I could feel it wrapping around me like a warm embrace. I felt no fear, no confusion. Only love. A love so pure, so consuming, that it seemed to dissolve every doubt, every worry I had ever carried. I knew, without a single doubt, that I was in the presence of something divine. I was in the presence of God. For most of my life, I had imagined God as distant, someone who watched from above but never truly reached out. But here, in this place beyond the physical world, I realized how wrong I had been. God was not just watching, He was right there with me, surrounding me in a love so vast and infinite that I could barely comprehend it. There was no voice in the way we understand voices, yet I could feel His words, His thoughts, His presence filling every part of me. It wasn't judgmental. It wasn't stern. It was pure, unconditional love, a kind of love that made everything else in my life, every fear, every regret, every moment of doubt, completely insignificant. As I stood there, or rather existed there, wrapped in this overwhelming love, I began to see visions unfolding before me. They weren't just images, I could feel them, as if I were living inside each moment. At first, I saw the world as I had always known it, people working, walking, scrolling through their phones, lost in their daily routines. But then, the scene shifted. I saw golden threads connecting people, between families, friends, even strangers. These threads pulsed with life, carrying something I can only describe as spiritual energy. But as time moved forward, something changed. The golden threads began to fade, replaced by something else, thin, artificial lines of light. They mimicked the original threads, but they were weaker, empty. I saw people sitting in the same room yet completely disconnected, their eyes fixed on screens instead of each other. I saw families at dinner tables, silent, their hands scrolling through their devices instead of reaching out to one another. I felt a deep sadness as I realized what I was witnessing. Technology had become a substitute for real human connection. God didn't need to explain it to me, I understood instantly. The problem wasn't the technology itself. It was how we were using it. I saw how we had allowed it to take the place of real relationships, deep conversations, and even our connection with God Himself. It wasn't just that we were distracted, it was that we were numbing ourselves. Social media, endless scrolling, constant notifications, it was all keeping us from the very thing our souls were longing for. True connection. I turned toward the presence beside me, and though he spoke without words, I felt the question deep in my soul, "Do you see what has happened?" I wanted to look away, to deny it, but I couldn't. I had been just like them, one of them. Always busy, always connected, yet somehow deeply disconnected. My heart ached with the realization. The vision shifted again, and this time, I saw something that made my heart sink. I was shown a possible future, one that wasn't set in stone, but was the path humanity was heading toward. In this vision, people were more connected to their devices than ever before, but their souls were dimming. I saw faces illuminated by screens, eyes glazed over, fingers endlessly scrolling, but their spirits were fading. It was as if something essential was being drained from them, leaving them empty, restless, lost. I watched as families stopped talking, each member engrossed in their own digital world. Friends sat next to each other, but they weren't really present, their minds were elsewhere, trapped in an endless cycle of distractions. Even in moments of silence, no one was truly alone with their thoughts anymore. Instead of seeking comfort in prayer, reflection, or connection with others, people filled every empty space with digital noise. Notifications replaced whispers from God. Likes and comments replaced genuine conversations. The spiritual bond that once connected humanity to the divine was drowning in static. I turned back to God, overwhelmed by the weight of what I had seen. How did we let this happen? The answer came, not in words, but as a deep understanding that filled every part of me. It wasn't technology's fault. The problem was in how we had allowed it to shape our lives. We had made it an idol, something we turned to for comfort, validation, even purpose. Instead of using it as a tool, we had let it become our master. For the first time since arriving in this place, I felt a deep sorrow, not for myself, but for all of us. The world I had known was so distracted, so disconnected from what truly mattered. And yet, in the midst of my grief, I felt something else, a gentle, unwavering hope. God wasn't showing me this to condemn us. He was showing me because there was still time to change. As I stood there, absorbing the weight of what I had seen, the vision shifted again. This time, I saw a different future, one filled with hope. It wasn't a world without technology, but it was a world where people had learned to use it with wisdom and balance. I saw families laughing together at the dinner table, their phones tucked away. I saw friends sitting face to face, engaged in deep conversation, truly seeing each other. I saw people waking up in the morning and, instead of reaching for their devices, they took a moment to pray, to reflect, to simply be present. In this world, technology was no longer a replacement for real connection, but a tool used for good. I saw people using social media, not as a way to escape reality, but as a way to bring people together in real life. I saw meditation and prayer apps helping people find quiet moments in their day, instead of becoming just another distraction. Even in the busiest cities, I saw people pausing, taking deep breaths, reconnecting with something greater than themselves. It was as if humanity had remembered something ancient, something sacred, the value of presence, of silence, of true connection. God's voice, though still not spoken in words, filled my soul once more. This is the path you must choose. This is the world that is still possible. The weight of His love, His longing for us to return to Him, pressed into every part of me. He wasn't asking for us to abandon technology, He was asking for balance, awareness, and intention. He wanted us to remember that we were created for something deeper than endless scrolling, something more meaningful than fleeting digital interactions. We were created for real love, real connection, real communion, with each other and with Him. I felt a sudden pull, as if I were being drawn backward. The warmth of His presence began to fade, and in an instant, everything went dark. Then, with a sharp gasp, I opened my eyes. I was back in my body. The first thing I felt was pain, a deep, aching pain in every part of my body. My chest burned, my head throbbed, and it felt like I could barely breathe. I could hear muffled voices around me, the steady beep of machines, the soft hum of hospital equipment. It took a moment to realize where I was. I was alive. Tears filled my eyes as I took in my surroundings. My family was there, my mom, my dad, my younger brother, hovering over me with looks of pure relief and disbelief. My mom clutched my hand so tightly it almost hurt, whispering prayers of gratitude. A doctor stood nearby, shaking his head in amazement. "We didn't think you were going to make it," he said. "Your injuries were severe, but somehow, you healed faster than we expected." But the real miracle wasn't my body. It was what I had seen. What I had learned. Lying there in that hospital bed, I knew I had been given a second chance, not just to live, but to change the way I lived. I couldn't go back to the way things were before. I couldn't let myself fall into the same patterns of distraction, the same mindless scrolling, the same false sense of connection. I had to share what I had seen. The first time I looked at my phone again, something inside me felt different. I no longer saw it as just a device, I saw it as a choice. A choice to either lose myself in it or to use it with intention. A choice to either drown in the noise or to create space for silence, for prayer, for real relationships. That was the moment I knew. I had to tell this story. As I lay in that hospital bed, I made a promise, to God, to myself, to the people I loved. I would not let myself fall back into the same trap. I had been given a glimpse of what happens when we allow technology to consume us, when we trade real connection for empty digital distractions. But I had also seen hope, a future where we used these tools wisely, where we didn't let them take the place of what truly mattered. I knew I had a responsibility to share this message. The first few days after I was discharged, everything felt different. I noticed things I had never paid attention to before. The way the sun felt on my skin. The sound of the wind rustling through the trees. The warmth of a real conversation, uninterrupted by notifications. It was like I had been sleepwalking through life, and for the first time, I was awake. I started setting boundaries, limiting my time on social media, putting my phone away when I was with loved ones, making space for silence, for prayer. And every time I did, I could feel God's presence more clearly than ever before. I kept the broken remains of the phone I had been holding the day of my accident. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. It was a reminder, a symbol of the life I had lived before, and the life I had now. Every time I looked at it, I remembered God's message to me. Technology is not the enemy. But when we let it replace real connection, when we let it drown out the whispers of the divine, we lose something sacred. And that is a loss far greater than any we can imagine. If you've made it this far, I want you to take a moment and really think. How much of your life is spent lost in a screen? How often do you reach for your phone instead of reaching for the people around you? When was the last time you sat in silence and truly listened for God's voice? I don't believe you're here by accident. Maybe, just like I was, you're being called to wake up. If this message spoke to you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever had an experience like this, where God spoke to you, where you felt His presence in a way you couldn't ignore, tell your story. The world is drowning in distractions, but we can be the ones who help bring people back to what truly matters. Thank you for listening. And remember, look up.